What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 114 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk to you about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And today's episode is brought to you by IQ Power Tools. They manufacture a comprehensive range of innovative power tools with integrated dust collection systems. Check out their website, iqpowertools.com, to see if they're going to be in your neighborhood on their War on Dust tour. And today we're joined by Michael C. Stone. He is the author of Profit and Markup, as well as Profitable Sales, both books for contractors to help you price and sell jobs to become more profitable. Both of these books are on our list of recommended books found at howtohardscape.com/books. Be sure to check them out and enjoy this conversation with Michael C. Stone about profit, markup, and sales. Today we are joined by Michael C. Stone. He is a speaker and author with decades of experience in the construction industry. He wrote the books Profitable Sales as well as Markup and Profit, both guides for construction contractors, and we're happy to have him on the show. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. Thank you very much for having us. We do appreciate the opportunity to help in any way we can here. By golly.
Michael, let's get started to get to know a little bit more about yourself, how you got started in the industry, and what brought you to today and where you are with being an author, being a speaker, and an educator in the construction industry. Can you give our audience a little bit of context about yourself?
Yeah, my father had a construction company, and when I was real young, and it got me started, I was nights and weekends after school. We didn't go play. We went over to the shop and worked. And, I started out sweeping floors and threading pipe and putting materials away. And 1954, he started me going with him to do estimating on projects. He focused on telephone and power lines coming into southwestern North Dakota at the time, because that was when the REA first got started, and they were bringing power into northwestern South Dakota, southwestern North Dakota, and then southeast Montana. He worked that whole area. Anyway, I was doing estimating back in 54 and went through, the rest of the time in high school, and I worked kind of like I worked my way up. I was about a 6-period apprentice, electrical apprentice at one time. I quit because I had other things I wanted to do. For cripe's sake, I have no idea what I was thinking, but anyway, I did. Anyway, so over the years, I worked through a lot of the trades. I did framing and concrete and roofing and siding and all that monkey motion, and then gradually worked up to the point where I started doing more estimating for the company I worked with. And then this crawling around on your hands and knees all day under a house as a plumber didn't really excite me too much. So I got into sales, and then I gradually started selling remodeling and stuff and some new homes. And over the years, I gradually migrated to my own business and kept getting more and more questions about, how to price the work and things like that. So I ended up we started about 1996 or 97. We started writing a Markup and Profit book, and it came out in 1998 or 99, I forget which. And then we had a lot of questions on sales. And so I wrote the book on profitable sales, and the contractors that use both of them have had remarkable results. I mean, we've got a laundry list as long as your arm of contractors that have, went from the verge of bankruptcy to very, very profitable companies today. And so I think of everything I've ever done, that's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of, is helping, guys, get their businesses straightened out so they can take better care of their families. And that's what Devin and I built our business on, is helping contractors take care of their families. That's the way we word it, and that's kind of the way we think. So that's a short, here's what I've done. And I've been in this business as of June this year. Went by my 60th anniversary in this business. So yeah, been at it a while.
And congratulations on that, Michael. That's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. So evidently we're speaking to someone here with a lot of experience in the industry, a lot of experience with dealing with contractors on, just knowing their finances, knowing their business a little bit better. Michael, with all of your speaking opportunities, all of the times you've spoken with contractors, what is a question that comes up or a problem that a contractor, a very common question that comes up when it comes to dealing with their business, with their finances? Your book covers a lot of topics from break-even points, overhead expenses, job costing, all of that. But what is something that's very common in terms of a contractor coming up to you and asking a specific question?
Okay, I will preface this by telling you that we've identified, I don't know, a whole bunch of different types of construction related services, hardscape being one of them, and landscaping, and you name it, we've dealt with them. And it always comes down to the same thing. And most of them, the guys we talk to, many of them are not most, but many of them are losing money. And, they've listened to all the wise old owls in this business telling them that, you can only charge 10% over cost or 20% over cost. And of course, that's nonsense. And so essentially what they say is, why can't I make money? And I just tell them very simply, you're not charging enough for the work you do. Well, I can't raise my prices because people won't buy. And my response to that is, how in the hell do you know? You've never raised your prices to find out. And the truth of the matter is, most contractors listening today could raise their prices 10%. I mean, right now today could raise every price they have 10%, and it wouldn't make one bit of difference in their ability to sell their work. You have to push it up, like on specialty work, you have to push it up, 15 to 20% before you notice any appreciable drop in sales. Remodeling contractors, they can push up their markup, and they're going to have to get up close to 30% bump before they notice any depreciable sales loss. New home construction isn't quite as high. It's probably, if you could raise your prices 15 to 20% and still be okay. But the bottom line is this: everybody listening, they could raise their prices at least 10%, and it would not affect their sales at all. And no buts to it. I mean, this is across the board, across the nation, coast to coast, border to border, same with Canada. And I've done 465 1 or 2 day seminars over the years. And, that's to literally thousands of contractors. And I can't tell you how many have called back and said, yeah, I raised my prices. And actually, I'm selling more now because people put more value in what I'm doing. Hey, good news. Okay.
Absolutely. Especially in a time like this when we're experiencing so much demand, it only makes sense that when demand is high and supply is low, we raise our prices to be able to capitalize on that, but also provide our clients more value in doing so. Mm-hmm. And Michael, having said that, has there ever been a time where you've given that advice to a contractor, they raise their prices, they speak with you again, and they say, Michael, I lost all my business because I raised my prices?
Not once.
Exactly. That's just great to hear that as
mm-hmm.
in and of itself, right? Like we do have this fear notion sometimes of raising our prices, and that's going to cause all our business to go. But you have dealt with many contractors, and they've raised their prices, and they've probably made a better living by doing so.
Oh yeah. I'm just taking a rough guess, but I suppose over the years we probably come in contact with somewhere between 30 and 40,000 contractors, and even through seminars and phone calls and whatever. I've never had not one company, not one has ever come back and told me I lost my business because I raised my prices. Mm-hmm. It just isn't going to happen.
Exactly. Now, Michael, with that, we hear a lot in our industry, people charging by the square foot. They go in, they measure, they maybe say, their cost 4 times that, or per square foot, they're charging this amount. What is the downside of doing something like that? Do you see a downside? Do you think that's a good way about going about it in terms of estimating, or is there a different approach in terms of knowing your numbers better? And where would you start with something like that?
I'm not a fan of pricing anything by the square foot. It's a good cross check, I'll give you that. But as far as doing your estimating, you need to compile your numbers for labor, materials, any specialty contractors you may hire to help you out, and other costs. Combine them all, times your markup equals your sales price. And you don't want to price things out on a square footage basis. It's like, somebody says, well, how much does a kitchen for per square foot? Well, how much does a car cost per pound? I mean, it makes about as much sense. What are you talking about? And so to me, when people start, especially a lot of people in the specialty trades, they start using the square footage stuff because that's what their buddies are doing. And that's what they were told down at the pool hall. Somebody told them this is how you ought to do it. But they haven't run the numbers themselves. And so they have no idea where they're really at. And in most cases, and I mean most, they're going to end up losing money before they finally get it straightened out and start charging up for their work. You can never use numbers based on what anybody else tells you. And if you read my books and listen to the seminars and stuff I've done, I never tell anybody what their markup should be. What I tell them is this is the minimum markup you should use, but I never tell them what their markup should be. That kind of forces them to do their own math and figure it out for themselves. And that's what we want them to do. That way they know their markup is correct and they're going to be charging enough for the job costs, for the overhead, and to make a profit as well.
And your book lays out formulas that you can go about knowing your own numbers. But like you said there, the contractor themselves needs to figure out their own numbers. It's not something that you can put a number to that and like a markup amount or whatever and tell them to go with that. They need to understand their numbers better.
And I would never, ever tell my accountant I want them to figure out my markup or my bookkeeper. This is one of those things, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And all right, and you need to sit down and do your own math. And guys that tell me I can't do that, that just tells me they're too damn lazy to think. Okay, you got to think this thing through. This is what business is all about. You're not in business to please people. You're not in business to be a good guy. My favorite saying is, you want a friend, go buy a dog. You're in business to make money. And the only way you make money is if you know you're charging enough for the work you're doing. And of course, that's what our markup on profit book addresses, that issue from stem to stern.
Now with that, how do we know if we're underpriced? Do we look at our market? Do we talk with other contractors in our market? Or is this something based on our costs and our lifestyle and what kind of salary we want to draw from our company and profit that we want to make to be able to grow our company? Is this a cost-based analysis, or is this a market-based analysis, or is this somewhere in between?
Well, I'll tell you the things you shouldn't do, and that is base your prices on what anybody else is doing, because the majority of contractors are not charging enough for work they do. And if you mimic their prices, that means you're going to be too low. And I say that because there's extremely strong evidence that 9 out of 10 contractors won't make it through a 10-year cycle. In fact, it's 1 out of 3 fail their first year. So that tells you that at least, the first year, 1 out of 3 contractors are not charging enough for the work they do. And if you mimic them, you're going to go out right with them. So you got to sit down and do your own numbers and get them right. There is no easy way to it. If you want something easy, then, go pick an easy profession like being an attorney or being a doctor or something like that. That stuff's easy compared to being a contractor.
Have you experienced any holdbacks or contractors when you tell them to raise their prices? They need to be making more money. What are their objections to something like that? Or is it fairly easy for them to say, okay, I need to raise my prices? Do they have any, other than saying, you know what, I'm going to lose business if I start to raise my prices? Like, what is truly holding them back when you say raise your prices?
The underlying thing is they don't really know what their numbers should be. And, humans, not necessarily contractors, but humans in general don't like change. And contractors take that to the nth degree, and they don't like change. And so, if I or you or someone else tells them they need to raise their prices, well, I want to think about it. Well, what the hell's there to think about? You want to make money and take care of your family, or you don't? That's it. That's the bottom line. And, when I tell people, they need to raise their prices and they start giving me yabba, they just haven't heard enough yet. And when they heard enough, pretty soon it dawns on them that maybe there is something to what I'm giving them, and they start paying attention. Butts never helped anybody. You got to especially, hell, our markup and profit book has sold in 43 countries around the world. And, when you get that kind of exposure and you get almost zero negative feedback on it, the stuff works. And so, when you got someone like that, not because it's me, but when you got somebody that's wrote a book that's had that kind of success, you might want to sit up and pay attention, because, there's something to what's going on there.
What's the importance of knowing your break-even number for a season when you start your budget? Is it once you hit that number, you kind of got that weight off your shoulders where you can kind of know that whatever comes in after that point is going to build your company a bit further? What is the mental, I guess, confidence, whatever it might be, in terms of knowing that break even point? Or is that just something that every business just needs to know, and whether or not it helps them in moving past that break even point or not, it's just a number that you need to know?
Everybody has their own opinions on break even. To me, when you hit your break even point, especially if you can pinpoint, what month that should be ahead of time, and your planning should be done between November 15th and December 31st from the previous year. If you say, I'm going to hit my break even point, August 26th, and you hit it ahead of that, then you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're working, you're planning and meeting your goals and making things work. If you don't hit it, then you've got something that isn't functioning the way it should. Either your sales are not up, your production's not up. What's going on? Why aren't we hitting our goals? And that's what a break-even point is. Essentially, it gives you your first big goal for the year, which is, where your outgo meets your income, or income meets your outgo, rather. And it's important to learn how to do the break even. We've got several pages in our markup and profit book that takes you step by step through the process. And it's right about this time of year is when guys start hitting their break even points, and that also gives you the ability that when you hit your break even point, now you know that you can bump your prices 10%, and that is going to make your net profit for the year even higher. And that's what a break even point is. It gives you a place to start to see how much money you really want to make. And it has nothing to do with being greedy. I read that on a post the other day. Some guy said, we're not greedy. We don't charge more than 10% on our subcontractors. And I thought, well, there's another guy that just, he hasn't hurt bad enough yet. He will.
Or maybe he doesn't evaluate his numbers after his job to know that hurting enough, which brings me to my next question on being able to evaluate your numbers after a project is completed. Has there ever been in your career, talking with contractors, any major revelation in terms of that job costing process, knowing what the job costs afterwards and comparing it to the estimated numbers? Any big revelations in terms of, wow, we need to change this in our business because we were doing this and we didn't know we were doing it at the time? Has there been ever anything that has come your way in terms of a contractor making a major realization from their job costing?
I think that the biggest thing I've seen, and I'm writing another book on that subject right now, on developing a system for estimating, but the thing that I see is that job costing keeps your database of numbers that you have for labor, for materials, for your specialty contractors, for other costs. Your job costing keeps that database of numbers accurate. So when you do your estimates, you're dealing with accurate numbers. Okay, because I don't care if you don't get a good estimated cost on the job. I don't care what kind of markup you use, unless it's like 4 times the cost, you stand a good chance of losing money. So an accurate estimate, and when I say accurate, I'm talking about good job costing and paying attention and doing what you should do as far as your system goes. You should easily be at an error factor of 2% or less on your jobs. And I don't care what you're doing, whether it's hardscape work or plumbing or landscaping or roofing or siding or concrete work, doesn't make any difference. If you do a good, accurate job of estimating, you can get your error factor down under 2%. And if you do that, you're going to make, with the right markup, you'll make no less than 6% on every job you do.
I just want to take a moment from today's episode to thank IQ Power Tools for being a sponsor of today's episode. This episode is brought to you by IQ Power Tools, the firm that builds smart, tough, award-winning, clean-cut concrete and masonry power tools that eliminate dust. Eliminating dust from your job site is smart, it saves time, it saves money, and it saves lives. Keep your job sites safe and healthy for you and your crew, as well as the neighbors and the homeowner around you, and look professional while you're on the job site with these IQ Power Tools dust eliminating systems. Visit them at iqpowertools.com and learn how to implement healthier and more efficient work practices for your next project. And give them a thanks on their social channels at IQ Power Tools for sponsoring the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. Now, one thing that can also come back and bite a contractor is their contracts and change orders.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke a little bit in markup and profit on each of these contracts, change orders. Where do we as contractors draw the line between this is a change order or this is something that we should kind of just do? Is there no line? Is it always just a change order if there's a change in the project? Or is there, you know what, we can do this for our client because it is a really small change, and it's going to maybe make that relationship with our clients a little bit better. Maybe it's going to mend that relationship a little bit. Or is everything just, you know what, change order, especially when we are not on site as the business owner and we just want our workers to follow a specific procedure?
Well, everybody looks at that a little different. I'm a firm believer in a good, solid, well-written contract up front. Everybody signs it. And in that contract, you have specific language that says, if you come to me and say, hey, while you're here, or by the way, do you have an extra minute here? Or would you please do this? That's a change. And when I get a change, I say, just a minute. Let's see what you want to do. Okay, now I'm going to estimate it. Fine. Here's the change work order. Sign right here. Give me a check for the amount, and then I'll make the change. Okay, that's the way it should be handled, because change work orders should be paid up front. This idea of waiting until after the job's all done and then coming back with changes, that's laziness on the part of the contractor. And frankly, it's a dumb way to do business. And so changes should be outlined completely in the contract. They should be written up. They should be estimated, written up. Customer signs them. Customer pays you up front for the change work order. And I might add in there that anything up to about $2,500 to $3,000 should be paid up front. If it's larger than that for the change, then it gets cut in half. You get half of it at the change work order, and you get the next half or the other half of the change on the next progress payment for the contract. Okay. And if you get down to the point where you have one progress, you're at the last progress payment and you have the final payment, and they come to you with the change, regardless of the size of the change work order, that gets paid 100% up front. Okay. And the reason is you never want to take a change work order and pile it on to the last payment on the job, because that's going to push your last payment real high. Now they got a lever to work you with. So what you do is you say, you want to keep your last payment should be no more than 2% of the sales price of the job. And that's why when between your last progress payment and the final payment on the job, you get all your change work orders paid up front. That way you still keep that final payment at 2% of the sales price of the job. And that protects you so that no matter what. And I have, as an arbitrator, and I did arbitrations in like 17 different states across the western half of the United States over a period of 24 years. It's amazing the number of times that I had, homeowners sit right there and say, well, I just decided I didn't want to make my final payment, and if they don't like it, they can sue me. Well, fortunately, the contractors had an arbitration clause and forced them into arbitration, and I'll let you guess who won that argument. Okay, so there's a lot of homeowners that are dishonest, and so if you don't keep your contracts up to date and with good language, and keep your change work orders written and paid up front, you're going to suffer in today's marketplace, because it's gotten the idea that homeowners have or building owners have that they don't have to pay, or they can refuse to pay, and they can start finding, usually what'll happen is somewhere between 60 and 80% of the way through the job, they start finding fault with what you're doing and starting to pick arguments and stuff like that. And they completely change on you. And the whole concept of that is they just don't want to make the final one or two payments on their contract. So they know if they get a fight started, in most cases, the contractor will go back and forth with them for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they'll just walk away from the job, and the homeowner gets, the whole job for a reduced price. And that is true in almost every case. When a homeowner starts arguing and fighting towards the end of the job, that's what they're trying to do. And that's get you to just forget everything and walk away.
So is one solution to that front loading the amount of money you draw on a job to that starting point, that midpoint, whatever it may be, and keeping as much as you legally can to that final payment upon completion of the project?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it front loading. What I'd say is I get a down payment, and of course, the down payment should never exceed 40%. Or if you're like working in California, you can't go over 10%. But in most cases, your smaller jobs gets a larger down payment. The larger jobs get a smaller down payment. In no case should it be less than about 20%, other than again in California where you're limited there. Okay. And then you should get a down payment with a contract. You get a progress or material purchase fee, if you want to call it that, on the first Friday of the job. And then depending on the size of the job, you should be paid every other Friday. If it's a large job where you're working 8, 10, 12 weeks, something like that, you get paid every other Friday with the last payment and on the day the job is complete. If you're working on a job where you're only going to be there like 6 or 7 days, then you get your down payment, you get your first progress payment, and the next week you get the second progress payment and your final payment. It should be at least 3, no less than 3, but certainly 4 or more payments. And so you split them up and get even numbers so the customer can remember what the number is. And again, keep your final payment no more than 2% of the sales price of the work. You do that, you're going to find a lot of those payment problems go away real quick.
Absolutely. And as an arbitrator, besides things like change orders, what's a common issue that you see arise between a client and a contractor throughout your years? I'm sure contracts have been one of the major changes in this industry since you've started. So what can we as contractors kind of not expect, but I guess foreshadow and maybe insert into our contracts, not like the wording or anything, but what is a common issue that definitely arises between client and contractor?
Well, you got to remember that here's one of the big ones. The contractors think that, well, we build great quality. Okay, give me a definition of quality. You can't do it because everybody has a different definition. So the customer says they did a lousy job. There's no quality in this job at all. And the contractor may say, hey, we did the same thing we do all the time. It's a perfect job. And so the customer's expectation of quality is going to be 3, 4, 5 times as high as the contractor. And so if the contractor is smart, he will build into his contract language that says that your quality standards for your work is going to be based on the information provided in the Residential Construction Performance Guidelines written by the National Association of Home Builders. There's a booklet, and that's the only booklet I know that's really good as far as defining what quality is. And if the work you do isn't in there, then you need to sit down and write out a set of guidelines what the quality is, and you make that a part you make that an addendum to your contract. So there's absolutely no question about what your quality standard is. And when the customer signs the contract and signs the addendum, they have agreed to that standard of quality, and they can't come back later on and start hollering and griping about quality, because that is what triggers a lot of arbitrations and what's the other one that mediation. Mediation is the worst thing you can use in construction. Okay, mediation works fine for husband and wife fights and family fights and stuff like that, but arbitration should be binding arbitration, and it should be done by a non-attorney arbitrator. Okay, you don't want an attorney as an arbitrator because you spend 3 days worth of time educating them on what the problem is. Where if you get somebody that knows construction and have them arbitrate a job, they already know what the problem is. They just got to figure out, is the problem covered by the contract or not? And if not, why not? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's the that and gray areas on the contract. Contractors don't know how to do something, or they don't agree with something, so they write a real gray contract, and of course then the fight starts because the customer is expecting one thing and the contractor says no, it's not in the contract. Fight's on.
And as hardscapers, our ICPI would be something that we would want to put into our contracts, just speaking to the audience here, that we follow those kind of standards that are set by ICPI in our industry. And Michael, with marketing, that kind of came up in your book as well, and some interesting tactics, even from 1999, that are still definitely things that we as contractors want to do on every job site with our marketing. Is there anything else that has kind of come up in conversations with many different contractors since the publishing of your book that you'd say that to any contractor, they need to double down on this, or even very unique things that contractors have come to you and said that they do this, and this is where they get a lot of their marketing from?
Well, the thing that I've seen that's done the most for contractors, and of course now this pertains more to remodeling a new home than it does for hardscaping, but that is using what they call wraps on the vehicle, where you have a vehicle and it's nice and clean, and they put these vinyl wraps on it with all your marketing information on. Those things work really well. And so I think the other side, when you see a lot of landscaper hardscapers, they really don't do a good job of getting their vehicles cleaned up and signed so that the customers know who they are. Like one of the big ones is, Lutz Landscaping would be a company name and their phone number right underneath it in great big letters you could read a block away. Nobody does that, and I don't understand why. I mean, how do you expect people to call you if they don't know who you are or what your phone number is? And so, that and direct mail, emails now are working, but you got to be consistent. You can't do one once in a while and then come back 6 months later and do another, and that doesn't work. This is why if you notice our Markup and Profit newsletter, it comes out every other week. We've been doing that newsletter now for 21 years. And we have one newsletter every other week, and it's very consistent. People know it. They expect it.
I agree, especially with email marketing. The argument might be, well, our clients are one-off clients. Well, you could be reminding that client about you, your service, and they may need something else done on their property as well. They like you so much, or they could remind you of your company and refer you to somebody that just came up in conversation that, you know what, they need some hardscape work. I've got the right contractor. It's just a great reminder to put into your contractor's mind and to keep on their mind.
Yeah. And how many of here's a question for you. How many of the hardscapers out there make it a regular practice of finding about 8 or 10 new home builders and constantly market to them? Sooner or later, you're going to get their service because, if they don't do the hardscaping for the customer, they'll refer you to them. But nobody does that. They don't let people know. They expect contractors to call them. Doesn't work that way. You got to get out and actively solicit, like the new home builders. Sometimes the remodelers get into it, but not very often. So I would focus on the guys building new homes. The other thing I would do would be to look at the suppliers you have. I think there's a big company called Rainbird. I don't know. I'm sure they're still in business. But have you went to your local Rainbird distributor and said, "Hey, look, we do hardscaping, and will you refer us? We'll use your products." That's a win-win for both sides. And they'll have the guys behind the counters at these stores will have 2 or 3 guys they know, and that's it. That's who they refer. So when you go in to see them, take in a box of donuts. You find out when they have their office meeting. They all have a meeting once a week, once every 2 weeks, where all the counter people meet and talk about the problems, whatever else going on. Find out when that is, and 10 minutes before the meeting, show up with a box of donuts to say, "Hey, and here's my business cards, and we'd like you to refer us." How many have done that? I know an HVAC contractor that started doing that, and he got 100% of his business. He was a duct cleaning service, air duct cleaning in the house. And he went around to the local HVAC contractors around town. He went to 8 of them. And within a month, he had 7 of them were referring him to customers for air duct cleaning. And he got to the point where they were giving him more business than he could do. And it was all because he went and talked to them ahead of the meeting and gave them some donuts and said, "Thank you very much," and handed them their business cards. Active marketing. You got to get out and get after it. I mean, guys think, "Oh, I'm so good, everybody will call me," and that isn't true.
And that made me smile, Michael. I started working for a dealer 7 years before I actually started my own hardscape company. And who do you think I was referring when it came time to give out these referrals? It was those contractors that were making that relationship with me. How rare it was that a contractor would come in with donuts, with coffee. But those ones that did, they were the ones that made a lasting impact.
Yeah, you betcha. You betcha.
Now, when it comes to sales, Michael, as we kind of wind down on this interview, just started your profitable sales book. Really excited to get into that, as well as your, just finishing up your Profit and Markup book. Lots of great information in each of these so far, as well as the profitable sales. What is that number one mistake or a common mistake? It seems to be a common question I have for you, but a common mistake that contractors have when it comes to understanding sales. What is a thing that they're misunderstanding, or that they don't understand, or that they have a question for you about sales? Do you have anything common misunderstanding like that?
Yeah, primarily is, they haven't studied sales. They don't have a system for sales. They go out and they think that their job is to drive around town and give out numbers, and maybe some of them, the customer will call them back and it'll stick, or they go out and see the customer and then send them quotes through the mail or email or something like that. That doesn't work. You sell face to face. That's where people sign contracts. They don't sign contracts through emails or over the phone, although it's legal now. But you got to get in front of the customers and you ask questions. You get commitments from them before you start agreeing to do any estimating. How soon will you want to get this job started? And all right, let's talk about your budget. Don't be afraid to talk about a budget. You got to have to talk about money sometime. Might as well be upfront. Because if they're thinking $3,000 and you're looking at $15,000, you got a little ways to go there. You got to get together with that customer. So, our sales book gives a pretty good outline of what a person should do when they go out on a sales call and how to deal with the customer. And the main thing is to get a commitment from the customer so that if you do an estimate and you present your numbers, they're ready to make a decision. And I've been working on that. I started selling remodeling in 1969, and I'd been in this. I sold for about 2 months and was getting nowhere. And I had a wise old owl in our group. He said, "Get them to make decisions before you figure any of your numbers. Save yourself a bunch of time." And boy, he was dead on with that. And so over the years, I tell people, my job isn't to drive around and give out free estimates. My job is to put projects together. So I'll work on putting your project together as long as you're willing to make decisions as we go along. And you did tell them that. And you should get your sales to leads ratio down to about 1 in 3. That's about normal. That's about where you should be. And so if you're selling 1 out of 10, you're not selling, you're order taking. That's what you're doing. You're getting lucky and somebody likes the way you part your hair or something. It's got nothing to do with your work. So yeah, you need to study sales. It isn't something that you just drive around and give out numbers. That doesn't work. Yeah. You end up with the leftovers that nobody else wants to do. You end up with those kind of jobs.
Mm-hmm. That budget question is a difficult one. Do you have any kind of wording or anything that we can say to the client to kind of get that budget out of them? Because that can be a kind of sticky situation when we ask them, "Do you have a budget in mind?" and they say no. Is it a matter of us saying, "Well, a project like this is usually in the range of this," and give them the number first? Or should we stick to, no, we need to get a budget out of them before we kind of give them our range?
Well, it's up to the person or the individual. I have in the profitable sales book, there's a whole several pages of in fact, it's about 30 pages of exactly how to ask that question. But, you never let the customer tell you they're not going to do something. You say, "Would you share with me the budget you have in mind for your job?" "Well, we're not going to tell you what we want to spend." "Okay, fine. I'm going to give you some ranges here." And you give them the mid-range first, the high range second, and the low range third, in that order. And you don't give them one lump sum. You give them a range. Your mid-range for this job is probably going to be somewhere between 10 and 12,500, 13,000, somewhere right in there. Now, if you want to put a few more, mentioned some particular trees you'd like. Those are very expensive. So you're looking at somewhere between $14,000 and $16,000. Now, if you don't want those trees and you want to do something else and you want to cut the price down on the job, we can get you down in the probably $7,000 to $9,000 range. So you have to tell me where you want to be so I can design your job to fit your budget. Okay. And if they won't give you a number, then just walk away because you're wasting your time. Okay. But you will find in most cases that if they're serious and they want the work done, they'll pick a budget. And then it's up to you to make sure that you design the job to stay within that budget. And the minute they start throwing other stuff in, which they will do almost every time, you got to say, "Wait a minute, time out, hold it. Okay. That budget range you want, that stuff doesn't fit in that budget range. Now, if you want to push the budget up, we can put those trees in, or that type of brickwork in, or those pavers in, or the water feature, whatever you want to do. But, it's like everything else. When you go to the grocery store and take food out of there, you got to pay for it. And same holds true when, you want certain things in your landscaping around your property, you got to pay for it. And you got to get on them, because if you don't say something, they will assume, they'll go back and say, oh, well, we always talked about that. Well, no, we didn't. Now you got an argument, and you don't get sales when you're arguing with customers.
Absolutely. And Michael, thank you so much for your time. I feel like that's a great place to stop here. Profitable Sales is the book that I'm reading right now by you. I've already read Markup and Profit, and recommend any contractor listening to this to go ahead and get that and get started on that book as well. Michael, where can our audience go to learn more about you, everything that you've got going on? Where do you want to send them to?
Our website, markupandprofit.com, and it'll take you right there. And be careful when you get in there, because there's something around 400 or 500 articles that we've written over the last 20 years. And we got all kinds of different products, and, like estimating information, and sales information, and management information, and a bunch of products from other companies in there. You can get lost in there real quick. One time we had 300 and some pages in there. I don't know how many we got now, but our markupandprofit.com is where you can go, and it'll help you. Even though, hardscaping guys say, well, you do everything on remodeling. Well, yes, we have focused on remodeling, but the principles work exactly the same regardless of what kind of work you're doing. Okay. So, we've had steel erectors, guys that, build steel structures. We've had hardscapers, we've had landscapers, we've had pool builders, guys that build swimming pools, guys that build commercial buildings, electricians, plumbers, roofers, siders, you name it, have used this stuff and used it all very successfully.
The principles are no doubt universal to contractors. Yep. And Michael, thank you for that information. Thank you for the books. Thank you for everything that you do in terms of education. And thank you so much for your time today, for joining me on the show. You
betcha, Michael. Thank you for having us, and we appreciate it. And if any of your listeners have any questions, they can go to our website, or if worst case comes to that, they can always give me a call, and we'll see if we can give them some help.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Visit us at howtohardscape.com for more information on this subject. Let us know what you want to learn about in future episodes by reaching out to us on our social channels. We are at How to Hardscape on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you to those that have been messaging us and giving us some great ideas. And go check out at IQ Power Tools while you're on Instagram. Check out their lineup of power tools with integrated dust collection systems that they have, or at www.iqpowertools.com. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.